RealAg Live, everybody. I'm your host, Shaun Haney. Thanks a lot for tuning in today here on this Friday. Hope you're having yourself a great day. For those of our viewers in the prairies, preparing possibly for a big snowstorm this weekend, something to look out for. And, of course, in the east, everybody trying to rapidly finish corn harvest. So whatever you're doing, thanks a lot for tuning in, whether you're in the combine or the office. Today's RealAg Live is brought to you by AGI. Protect your stored grain with a bin you can rely on and a reputation to back it up. With over 100 years experience, AGI West Steel leads the industry in manufacturing quality bins that last for generations. From your grandfather's bin to yours, AGI West Steel has you covered. Visit aggrowth.com/weststeel for more information. Today, we are going to talk about farm management. And of course, a lot of times we talk about the markets, we talk about some of the ag policy stuff that's happening, agronomics, but farm management is critically important as well. And today we're going to really hone in on a topic that I think is something that often gets ignored. Now, agriculture is not alone in this. I think it's just something that entrepreneurs in general ignore, which is performance reviews. And there's some excuses to not do it, but there's a lot of reasons to go through the process. And today we're going to talk to Jennifer Wright. She is Senior HR Advisor, Stakeholder Engagement Specialist with the Canadian Agricultural Human Resource Council. So I'm looking forward to this discussion. Now, like all RealAg Lives, we want you to participate. So whether you have comments or questions for Jennifer, please enter them in the comment box, whether you're watching on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, or Twitch. We love when you participate. So right now, let's bring in Jennifer Wright. Hey, Jennifer, how are you?
Great. How are you?
Doing fantastic. It's Friday. What could be wrong?
It's Friday and 19 degrees in November in Ottawa, so there really can't be anything wrong.
No kidding. I did say on RealAg Radio today that I'm a little bit ready for snow though. Like we're gonna get 30 to 60 centimeters in parts of the prairies this weekend. It's the end of November, but I know Ontario's not done their corn harvest, so there's still some cheerleading for some nice weather. So
we'll take the break for now.
Okay, let's start at 100,000 feet. No matter your farm size, why are staff reviews important?
Well, staff reviews are really important so that you have an opportunity to provide some feedback to the people that are working for you, whether, no matter what they're doing on the farm. And it's also a really good opportunity for you to hear from them. So you're hearing, what they think is going right. There's always ways to learn from their feedback as well. And those two-way conversations and those reviews can be very informative to how you manage your farm.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, is that it's not just a one-way flow. Here's what you did right, here's what you did wrong. But it's a great opportunity for the manager or the farm owner to really find out some things from the people that are working in the business on a daily basis.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So does it matter that many of the people that are working on a farm are seasonal? Because I think sometimes the excuse is, well, I don't have any full-time employees. I've got some people that come in here for the growing season. The growing season is over, and whatever. Well, next year is a new year. Is that an excuse to use?
I don't think so at all. It's really tough to find workers these days, and it doesn't matter if they're there year round or just seasonal. You want to hear from their experience, and you also want to provide them feedback. You want them to come back, the good workers to be able to, feel open to coming back the following year, and taking the time to provide feedback and to have that level of engagement will really help ensure that you attract good workers back to your farm the following season. And it also shows that you value what they're doing and you value them enough to provide feedback and to hear what they also have to say.
Does it need to be a super formal process, or can it be a little bit more relaxed and kind of informal?
I think it can be informal. I think sometimes with performance reviews, no matter what industry, they get a real bad rap for being super formal and not necessarily a way to communicate openly. And you really want to have that relationship with your workers where when you get to the formal part of the review. It's not a surprise because you've had good communication with them over the season or over the year or since the last time you've done your review. But you want to create a really comfortable environment to have a productive and constructive conversation.
Yeah, so when I use the description of informal, I'm thinking like, it doesn't necessarily need to be in the office, the meeting room, the boardroom if you have one. It can be okay to have a private conversation in the back of a tailgate. Is that fair?
I would say so. I mean, it's always good to have some sort of written documentation of your conversation. And by that way, it is a bit more formal. But I have found myself doing performance reviews, having the conversations in a more relaxed, informal environment is much better. You have a good conversation, you connect with your worker, and they're not feeling uncomfortable. And you can have a good, again, two-way conversation with them.
You just mentioned something important though, taking notes.
Hmm.
That's kind of a like in any meeting, it's kind of important to log actually what was discussed so that because it's fresh in our head. I'll remember this, and then other things happen and time moves on, and nobody remembers what was actually discussed.
Yeah, and I think with when you're doing performance reviews, it is as much as you should be having good conversations with your staff all the time. If you're going to take the time to do a review, you should be taking the time to document things as well and have that conversation agreed upon between you and your employee so that it sets a good mark for this is where we know you're at and this is where you need to go. It's good for setting goals. And by putting it in writing, it provides something to go back to in the next conversation that you have. And it also gives them something to aim towards as well.
Question here from Kara. Put it on the screen. Watching on Facebook. What do you recommend for employees that have requested performance reviews, but the employer doesn't seem to prioritize? I think this happens in a lot of small businesses, entrepreneurs. It's on a daily basis probably not their biggest priority. If you were to do some sort of polling, you probably have some survey data on that. But what do you do?
So I can completely relate. I grew up in a farm equipment dealership and that my parents operated, and I have very much lived that small entrepreneurial um, agriculture business environment where you're just trying to get from day to day, and especially during harvest or just coming out of harvest, you can be super busy. So it can be a challenge, I think, if the employee is asking for it. I think as employers, you need to be open to those suggestions and take it as a real opportunity to connect with your employees and a real opportunity to show that you value your employees and what they bring to the table as well.
I have a friend that what he does is he tries to have the conversation. It doesn't even call it a review. It's just kind of an update. Review sounds so like just it's a can
Yeah.
be a sort of intimidating word. They do updates at least every quarter, and he actually tries to do it every month, where it just sort of smooths out the process a little bit, and everybody's more on top of some of the issues. But doing a conversation like that with monthly, depending on how many employees you have, that's a big undertaking. You have to really be committed to something like that.
Yeah, and I think that's where you have to look at what's going to work best for your operation. And it doesn't have to be super, super formal, but there does need to be a process in place so that employees understand that, you know, they're part of that review process. That sometimes you have a casual conversation and sometimes you might be, being a bit more formal in those quarterly reviews or monthly reviews or annual reviews. Personally, I feel that if you're just touching base with your employees annually in a review process, you're probably losing opportunities over the year to provide feedback and to hear from them. But depending on the size of the organization, as well as the number of employees that you have to review, doing more than annual might be a bit problematic.
Yeah, as the employer, probably don't overpromise on frequency
Yes,
because you're setting
yeah,
yourself up for, if the employee is going to be disappointed about not having an annual, if you say you're going to do it quarterly and you don't follow through, you're creating the same problem.
Exactly. And I think that's a really good point. It's, setting the expectation so employees know what is coming and then following through on the expectations that you set.
What sort of things should be covered in an update or a review with an employee?
Well, I think you want to talk about things that have gone well over the period of time since your last point of conversation or review with them. And then, it's always good to provide some feedback on areas of improvement. But it's also very important to ask your employee what they're looking for and what they think they've done well and areas that they would like to improve on and how they would like to grow in their job. And taking that opportunity, I think, is again another way of showing the value that you have as an employer to their input to your organization.
So mixing in, like, I think that's one of the other. I think you just made another really key point, is having a mix of positives and not necessarily negatives, but areas of improvement. Because if it's all areas of improvement, it's pretty hard for the employee to leave with feeling it was really constructive discussion.
Yeah, and if you're getting to a point where you're having a review and the only feedback that you're giving is areas of improvement, I personally would say as a manager or as the boss of your team, you have not provided constructive support over the time that's gone past between the last review and now. There's always going to be good things that have happened. Someone's always provided something of value, even if they're a bit of a problematic employee. And you should also be, if there are issues, you should be addressing them when they're there, not just waiting to the annual review to bring things up.
Yeah, Lara gives a good comment here. After a long overdue performance review did happen at a previous job, Lara works at Real Agriculture. So it was a chance for me as an employee to say I'm being underutilized. I have more skills to offer. Now that's an interesting twist as well. Let's put it in a farm context. Man, I've been driving grain truck for the past 3 years. I really think I would be interested in maybe getting some combine time, just to come up with a fake
Yeah.
example. I think Lara brings up a good point.
Absolutely. And again, it goes back to that communication. You want to have open communication with your team all year round. But sometimes that's not possible. Things get busy. You're looking at planting season, harvest, there's a lot on the go. And you might not always be in the same location as your employees either as um, do your day-to-day work. So having those conversations and hearing from your employees is really great. And sometimes, like Lara says, you could have a solution to a problem right in front of you and not know that that employee would be interested in taking on more or, or trying something new because you haven't had the chance to have the conversation. So again, it goes back to that two-way conversation and hearing from them directly.
Okay, so we've got positives, things that the employee did well. We have areas of improvement. What else needs to be included in the conversation?
I think it's really good to talk about future goals and development and things, setting things, either projects to accomplish, tasks to accomplish, skills to develop or improve on. But being able to provide that long term, short term, and long term development for the employee is very important. It will give the employee an opportunity to tell you what they're interested in, but also know that there's a place for them to grow and that you as an employer are interested in providing and supporting that growth.
We should have started with this a little bit earlier, maybe. Let's back up pre-discussion, okay? The prep work that should go into preparing for the discussion. I think I can think of a few things that the employer should have in their note set, I guess, leading into it. What are some things that you would think are important?
Well, there's definitely templates that you can use to guide your thoughts and organize your thoughts prior to. I think it's really important to share anything like that with your employee that you're meeting with prior to as well. So you give them the same opportunity to think about their past time, whether it be that year or 6 months. But using a structured template to organize your thoughts, I think is very important. And in that, in CAHRC's HR toolkit, there's some templates that can help support this. But many of the performance review templates are looking at things like, what went well, what areas are there for improvement, and if you think about that prior to getting into a conversation, it makes it go much more smoothly. And then looking at identifying things to develop and goals for the future.
I got caught one time where I had I had some areas of improvement for somebody that was working for me, and I had these points of like, I think you need to work on this, this, and this, and then I got caught because not when I say caught, I mean just caught off guard, where the person I was doing the review with said, "Can you give me some examples of each of those
Mm-hmm.
where I did something that led you to that conclusion?" And it was an annual review, so there's something, it's a really good idea to have those examples to back up if you are going to make
Yeah,
a statement. I believe that you're exhibiting behavior XYZ, and here's two examples of what I mean by that. It allows you to explain it better, and also for the employee to get their head wrapped around what you're talking about.
absolutely. Yeah. And by being prepared for the conversations, it allows you to have those examples and to think about those examples as well. Similar to you, I know I've had colleagues that have been in annual reviews where something's been said, and then they say, "Well, give me an example," and they draw back to 11 months ago, some minor conversation that happened. And if that's the only example you have and there wasn't a conversation after that, probably leaving it 11 months isn't the best. And then bringing it up in a formal review
Yeah.
isn't the best way to do that, right? So by preparing, you can kind of think through, okay, what's happened over the last year? What's worked? Well, I think of this one thing. That only happened once. Is that really valid in bringing up in a review? Because
Yeah.
it never happened again. I think of this other thing. It happens regularly. Okay, well, then this is something that's a bit more, something to talk about.
And you also don't want to be like, okay, well, let's refer. Actually, I'm glad you asked for an example. Let's go to page 15 of my examples. And you remember on
Yeah,
August 20th at 7:45 in the morning, you said like, that'd be kind of silly too.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you have to, as an employer, think about how you feel if you were the employee. We've all been there.
Mm.
Not many of us have been just employers. We've been on the other side as well, or we've received feedback from, you know, coaches or teachers if we've never been in a position where we've been an employee. And so thinking about the delivery of your feedback, the tone of your feedback, and the constructive nature of how you present it is really important because it will help ensure that you're presenting it in a way that will be constructive, will be positive, and will result in your employee actually getting some value out of the conversation.
Yeah, for sure. Question here from Pinto McBean watching on Twitch. What do you think is the number one thing often missed by an employer when it comes to employee reviews?
That's a really good question. I think one of the main things that's often missed is that two-way communication. The employer review is not just you telling them what you think of their performance. It's a real opportunity to have a two-way conversation, to hear about where they want to go, what they think has worked. And by opening yourself to that two-way conversation, you are not only learning what can make your operation work more productively, efficiently, effectively, but you're also giving a signal to your employee that you value their input and that it's not just about you giving that, it's not just a one-way conversation. you're a part of a team, you value their input, and you want to hear what they have to say. And I think that's one of the things that's often missed in the review process.
Yeah, that two-way communication, it's okay to also ask, some questions that you typically wouldn't ask that person in that position. So for example, you know, what is your feedback on the way that we organize the logistics of harvest? Do you have any feedback on how we do it? Do you see holes in our strategy? I think employees at all different levels of the organization, they may see something or have a read on something that maybe you've completely missed. As an employer, you don't know everything. If you pretend to know everything, you're kind of a fool. So it's a really good time to seek feedback on things that are actually your own responsibility.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. There's no person in your organization that doesn't have value and doesn't see things that could contribute to improving how things are done.
Does pay have to be addressed in an annual review? Is that something that happens at different times in the year?
It depends on your compensation review structure. Quite often it comes up if you're doing just an annual review, and that's something that you need to consider. But and it is often if you're doing more of that formal review process and just once a year, it is often perhaps an expectation of what your employees will think will be addressed. Um, but again, if you manage the expectation of what comes out of a review, then you'll help the employee manage their expectations to what they're going to receive. And so if they're feeling like, okay, I get the one shot, talk to my boss, this year, and I'm expecting if I get flying colors on my review that I'm going to get a 5% increase, and it doesn't happen, you're going to end up with a really disappointed employee. But if you manage the expectation prior to going into the process about what will come out of it, then that's going to help as well. Again, it comes down to communicating expectations prior and then communicating well in that conversation.
Now we have farms that have say 20 staff members. They probably have an easier time getting their head wrapped around the review process. But we also have a lot of farms where there may be one, maybe two, or maybe they're just family members. That just because they're just family members, it's probably a good idea to still have these conversations. Is that fair?
Absolutely. It doesn't matter if your farm is family or external staff. It's a business, and you need to manage it like a business. And by having that structure in place, particularly with family members, if you're working in a professional business environment, it will also help mitigate any other issues that might come up that feel personal or miscommunication. If have a good structure in place, those issues that may come up otherwise will be lessened.
But it would be kind of weird in some situations, wouldn't it, if little brother is giving a review to big sister or something like that,
Absolutely.
or vice
Yeah,
versa,
yeah.
or just it's complicated.
It is complicated for sure. It's not, no one's going to say that one's easy. But having some structure there, I think it will help with that process.
Yeah. Some of this ties into some real family dynamics that I just don't want to make it too simple because I think anybody that's worked on a family farm realizes that some of this is there's some real crossing of swords at times that make it not the easiest. Another question from Pinto McBean, it's a good one. How often is it appropriate for an employee to ask for that increase from your perspective?
So that's interesting. And again, it can really depend on the environment that they're in. So if you're regularly giving a cost of living increase on an annual basis, and that person's job has not necessarily changed, then they may ask annually. They may ask a little less than that. But if you have an employee where you're leaning on them, you're increasing the amount of expectation that you put on them or their workload or expanding their job description, and not addressing their compensation, then you're probably going to hear from them more often. So it's hard to say what's appropriate. It really depends on the individual employee's situation.
Yeah, there's some farm kids probably watching this saying, "Man, yeah, I haven't had a raise in like 10 years. I'm still
Yeah.
mom and dad are cheap."
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
um,
And there's probably some farm parents going, my compensation package is a little broader than most companies because I'm paying for rent and food and cars.
yeah, remember your house? Yeah, stuff.
Yes.
We're drumming up a whole bunch of stuff here. We gotta be really careful,
Yeah,
Jennifer.
absolutely. We just want to keep it basic.
Do you have any data on how few farms are doing things like performance reviews? Do you have any data on that?
I don't have specific data. I have a lot of anecdotal information where I think there's room for improvement. I think, as we continue to have labor shortages and those labor shortages become more acute, many farmers are becoming more aware of the value of all human resource management practices and the value of having those best practices in place, and those include employee reviews. So, although I don't have data, I do know that from what I hear, there's room to improve, and that's starting to happen quite
Yeah.
rapidly across the industry.
Yeah, a lot of times we have discussions about, attracting, retaining talent. And a
Mm-hmm.
part of the retention part is engaging in these kind of processes so that there is that good mutual understanding on where people are at, and making sure that, going back to Lara's original question about, underutilizing people, it just makes sure that everybody's on the same page in terms of the challenges and keeping people really kind of looking for more in their career. Like, it's all a part of that retention strategy.
Absolutely, and it's a way to really demonstrate that you value what they're doing.
Yeah, for sure. Honestly, this has been, I think, very, very valuable. It's a topic that doesn't get covered, I think, enough in agriculture. I think a lot of times, like I said, we focus on some of the other things when it comes to HR, and this is something that no matter if your farm is just inside the nuclear family, or if you have a whole team of people in the 20 to 50 category, this is a good practice to engage on honestly probably a more regular basis, as we've heard, than just annually. Jennifer, I really appreciate you joining us here today.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks a lot for your participation, everybody, today on RealAg Live. I want to remind you that you can check out RealAg Radio on Rural Radio 147, 4:30 Eastern, 3:30 Central, 2:30 Mountain. Today we got a great RealAg issues panel. We'll talk about more than just the U.S. election. There's a lot of issues in agriculture right now. The Canadian government is doing a review of simulated meat. We're also going to dive into a whole bunch of other topics as well. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Live. Have yourselves a great weekend, and we'll chat again next week. Cheers, everybody.